So we are kicking off the Embedded Spark contest, and this year the theme is Experience Embedded. So we are here with Mike Hall, the principal architect lead for Windows Embedded, and actually want to ask Mike, how do you envision the future of the embedded experience? How do you envision the way people will interact and will get embedded into an embedded experience?
Right. So you mentioned the word experience, right? And this thing is about experience embedded. So I think there are two ways that you potentially experience embedded. One of which is potentially the device and the experience that you have with the device. And we'll come back to that in a second. But there's also the second part of it, which is the developer experience as well, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
So you think about two different levels of experience, and I think this is what you're aiming to get from the contest, which is for people to experience embedded development and to potentially see just how easy it is and how you can use your existing skills and knowledge around desktop development and desktop tools and languages to build something that is actually a truly embedded experience, right? So I think the first part of this is the developer experience.
Okay.
Right?
And what kind of technology are you thinking about? What kind of features are in the Windows Embedded Compact 7 OS and in the tools that are actually relevant to the experience factor of an application?
All right. So when you think about an embedded operating system or an operating system in general, again, we can break it down into two levels, right? One of which is just composing or building the operating system. And you think about the Compact 7 tools, they're embedded into or integrated into Visual Studio, right? So developers that are familiar with Visual Studio should be fairly familiar with the tools experience overall, right? You know, file new platform, Compact 7, and then start composing or generating the operating system image that you want to build. Once you've chosen the components of the operating system, and it's not a kind of a discrete process, you can obviously extend the experience as well, create your own drivers, create your own applications, write your own code on top of that. When you get to the level of writing the code at the operating system level, well, it's C and C++ and Win32, it's familiar APIs that people are probably already using on the desktop, right? But then you also mentioned the application development experience, and you have a choice of runtimes, a choice of languages there. So if you're a high-level developer that prefers to work at the level of C# and .NET Framework, then you have the Compact frameworks over there. If you're more of a low-level C, C++ or assembler developer, then you can even get down to that level as well. Right?
Okay.
So that's the level of experience.
That's good. That's good. And so you were saying that there's that developer experience, but also at the end of the day, the user experience with the devices. How do you foresee what's going to happen in the next years when it comes to interacting with devices, but also when it comes to what kind of experience will the devices bring to you in your daily life?
Right. Well, I think we need to look back a little bit and then kind of work forward from there. Right?
You're an architect. You look forward, right?
Sure. But let's go back first.
Okay, let's
so
do that.
if we roll back, say, 15, 20 years, the primary experience that people would have with devices was really a command line problem, right?
Yep.
So you have a command line, you type a string of things and something would happen, right? And then the experience moved forward from there to be a graphical experience. So one way to think about that is DOS to Windows, if you will, right? So you have a 2D windowing experience, you have keyboard and mouse for input, you know, relatively limited in terms of input and output, right? So we're now at the phase when you think not necessarily about the user experience, but what you think about is more of a natural user experience, right? So it's not necessarily icons on the screen and mouse and keyboard for input and output, but you start to put other pieces together. So you can think about touch and multi-touch as being one part of it. You can think about the Xbox 360 Connect for you know, full body input as opposed to keyboard and mouse. You can think about speech for input and output. Experience isn't necessarily purely about the input and output part though, right? The experience can also be the way in which a device acts on your behalf. So either consuming web services or consuming web-based data or digital content from somewhere and providing that to you in a way that makes sense for however you're going to be interacting with that particular device, right? So you can think about, you know, think of a couple of examples. You can think about a good example here would be if you're shopping on Amazon, right? You buy something and there's a recommendation engine that sits behind that. So people that bought this also like this other stuff here.
Yes.
So when you're recording TV shows on a TV set-top box. Well, people that watch this show potentially like to watch music,
Yep.
right? I mean, that kind of thing. So it's not purely about the how do I make it easy to get input to record a show, but then what additional experiences live around that. Right?
That implies basically the cloud. That thing we're talking about.
Sure.
Like seamlessly, you would be leveraging data that is in the cloud and resources from the cloud to enhance the experience of the user.
Right.
Okay, that's good. And would you say that today, Windows Embedded Compact 7 delivers what is needed to build this kind of new experiences? And if yes, actually, can you spell out a couple of features that you would definitely recommend to use, or that you will highly recommend to use in order to build a nicer experience around devices?
So I'll call out two. One of which is, if you want to build a rich user experience for the device, you're typically, for devices, building a custom shell or custom launcher or custom boot environment, I guess, for your device, right? So in that case, we have Silverlight for Windows Embedded. So it's based on Silverlight technology, which, you know, as a developer, you probably know that building user experience typically ends badly, right? So ideally you want someone, right? Ideally you want somebody with design experience to work on that part of it, and then you can focus on the code that lives underneath, right? So the first part is Silverlight for Windows Embedded. That allows designers to work on the design and interaction model and alpha blending and animation and timelining and all that kind of great stuff. And then you get the second part, you mentioned the cloud. So having a series of APIs that make it easy for you to consume REST-based services or SOAP-based services using Compact Framework and so on, it makes it really easy to do that part of it. So there's two examples, one of which is great UI and then the cloud programming model. Right?
Okay. If you were not a Microsoft guy, would you participate to that dev contest?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. So
what else did I say?
Choice. So I think that gives you a good picture of what the contest will look like. And actually, I think we'll get a really diverse type of experience at the end of the day with all the projects you're going to submit, guys. So if you're familiar with Visual Studio, want to become familiar with Visual Studio and the Windows Embedded Compact tools, I think that competition is for you. Thanks, Mike.
Sure, pleasure.